Order, order. David Morris to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I beg to move that this House has considered the reduction in the number of the House of Lords. Mr. Hollowburn, thank you so much for chairing this session, and it's an absolute honour to serve under your chairmanship. This debate is not designed to diminish the Lords, their responsibilities, their status or powers. If anything, this debate is trying to find a way forward where we can still retain the Lords' expertise and keep them there for life as they were originally appointed to be. This must not be seen as ageist or in any way derogatory to what goes on in the other place. I value the Lords are valued. Their expertise is second to none, irrespective of their type. Their constitutional role should not be underestimated. Mr. Hollowburn, the current makeup of the Lords is currently 786 peers, with 40 peers on leave or of absence or otherwise disqualified from sitting. The Conservative Party has 228 peers, the Labour Party 212, Crossbenchers 178, Liberal Democrats 102, Democratic Unionist Party 4, UK Independence Party 3, Plaid Cymru 2, Ulster Unionist Party 2, Green Party 1, non-affiliated 28 and Lords Spiritual 26. Now, I know that it's a bit long-winded to actually state how many Lords there are, but it is very important because our upper chamber is highly subscribed and probably one of the most highly subscribed democracies in the developed world. The numbers in attendance by age which was supplied to me by the House of Commons Library, the analysis reveals that the current mean age stands currently at 70 years, 0.4, so in effect 70 years. The median is roughly the same, implying a symmetrical distribution. With example, there are roughly as many peers over this age as there are under it. At a mean of 76.3 years is in the House of Commons is the oldest party of the UK Independence Party, though this should be taken in the context that there are only 3 of them. The mean ages of the 4 main groups of peers are the crossbench peers at 72.6 years of age, followed by the Labour Party at 71.3 years of age, then the Conservatives at 70 and the Liberal Democrats at 70.3 years of age. It is very difficult to analyse the activity of peers, yet brief analysis using Hansard data reveals that among the 20 most active members of the House of Commons, excluding the Speaker, the mean average age stands at 64.9%, which is over 5 years younger than the average of the House of Lords. This may suggest that younger peers are more active, though I would be cautious in drawing this conclusion, given that it's based on only a partial analysis of this data. In the last Parliament, the Honourable Member for Sheffield Hallam wanted to have a party-elected upper chamber. His proposal was, the upper chamber shall continue to be known as the House of Lords for legislative purposes. The reformed House of Lords should have 300 members, of which 240 are elected members and 60 appointed independent members. Up to 12 Church of England bishops may sit at the House as ex officio Lords Spiritual. This would halve the number of Lords, but be a semi-elected second chamber that would have huge ramifications for our unwritten constitution as well as our intellectual talent. I believe that this would be the wrong way ahead. It would be a drought on our intellectual talent in the other place. Dan Biles, the MP for the then member of North Warwickshire and Bedworth, introduced a private members' bill for the retirement of the Lords. Some members have utilised this provision. I have contacted Dan, and in our discussion he disclosed that the retirement age was always aimed at 75 but never mentioned. My proposal is this: to reduce the numbers of the House of Lords. What I'm about to propose could be seen as radical, and I hope it isn't. I want it to be seen as constructive and a good way forward. I believe there's a better way to slim down the whole of the Lords by 250 members, to be more proportionate to the Commons over a 20-year period. The Lords would eventually settle at 450 to 500. They then remained in the House of Lords as life peers, but they retire from the Lords as we know it at the age of 75. They may even want to retire from the Lords if they do wish, under Dan Byles' law. But that would be up to them. I would propose that the over 75, when Lords reach 75, the over 75s Lords become the Lords' Council. They can still be able to attend functions and use the facilities of the House of Lords, in fact, go about their daily business as they do now. They will still be remunerated. They were still in the House as before, and it will not cost any more than it actually does now. The problem is, Mr. Hollowbone, it is not the number of Lords that we have, it's how many we appoint. So we have to find a way forward so that we can value our existing Lords and appoint new ones in proportion to where we should take it in 20 years' time. The Lords' Council will be able to sit on committees in the new Lords' Council of their expertise and choice. They will be able to influence their colleagues and the government as before. However, they will not be able to attend the chamber and vote. That is significant in getting down the numbers and making it more of a working environment and chamber atmosphere as we know it in the Commons. What are the benefits? The whole purpose of this proposal is to value our peers without losing them, as I've articulated before, while we reduce the numbers over a period of 2 decades. This will allow a taper of reduction in a very sensible and measured manner. It will allow more active peers to debate and work on a regime suited to their stamina. So therefore, the Lords who, put it bluntly, are getting older, that can't attend the chamber on a regular basis, will be able to have that option because they will not be able to go into the chamber in the first place. However, they will be able to advise. It will allow a career path from the Commons into the Lords and make both chambers more efficient. The new appointees will be strictly limited and appointed in the same way as before. However, there will be constraints not mentioned in this debate that would have to be looked at to ensure that we have the correct amount of political system at work, but also stopping the perception of stacking the Lords by political means. The main benefit will be that we retain the expertise of all ages and reduce the numbers sensibly. As the median is currently 70 years of age, and there are as many under this age as over it, the maths naturally state that the initial period of this proposal, if it was to become law, there would be roughly a third of peers going in the new Lords' Council in the first 5 to 10 years. It will be up to the restrictions of the numbers of new appointees that will ultimately reconfigure the look of the new Lords structure. And I firmly believe that this is a viable and credible method to reduce the number of Lords and prevent, more importantly, the loss of our valued intellectual talent that an alternative elected second chamber would bring and eradicate. Mr. Hollowbone, it's very simple, very straightforward, and I would love to give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. I'm quite happy with most of what he said, but I'm concerned about the age being fixed, where some peers are very effective and very good beyond the age of 75, and some, perhaps not as many, are present as those who aren't as good or as clever, or in my case, the words are difficult and that sort of thing. So I would like to suggest a slightly different arrangement whereby a percentage, and I won't say what that is at the moment, that there be a percentage which can retire or may be requested to retire, and those people would compete for one of the remaining places. How about that?
Thank you, Mr. Hollowbone. That is a very valid and very constructive way forward as an annex to what I'm trying to do. To honourable members reading this in the future, I would like them to understand that this really is a very simplified view of what could happen in the future. Further debate would have to take place and further legislative process enacted to make this actually work. However, what my honourable friend has just said and articulated very well is that we could have a percentage of Lords that would assist a transition period and still retain, which is the whole ethos of this debate, our intellectual expertise in the other place. Mr. Hollowbone, I really have nothing more to add at this moment in time. However, I do think that this debate is very, very, very important, because for literally decades we have been trying to sort out the problem of the number of the House of Lords. And I, for one, did not like, even though I voted for it in its initial stages, the Honourable, my friend then from Sheffield Hallam's proposals. But I do think that we should look into this in a more measured and more stately way that suits the House of Lords as it currently stands and where it should go. Mr. Holborn, thank you.
The question is that this House has considered reforming the House of Lords and the number of peers. Kirsty Backman.
Thank you. I must apologise, I've not done a Westminster Hall debate before, so I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here. I'm the SNP spokesperson on the Lords. The SNP policy and what we support is no longer having a second chamber. And I understand the tone of this debate is about, seeing a way forward that is about reforming the Lords rather than getting rid of them. I think a way forward in terms of what's been suggested is really interesting. I think it would have the potential it would reduce the numbers. I think, as was mentioned by the Honourable Member, who's afraid of constituency I've forgotten, Isle of Wight, about the fact that some of the Lords are still very active and very effective over 75 was very interesting. And I think that possibly has to be taken into account. I think one of the concerns that I have with the proposal that's being suggested is that in the interim period of the 20 years, there is a risk that the Lords in general will continue to get older. If you are reducing the numbers, then presumably you're no longer appointing that many more in the interim period. So you push the average age up, even though you're having a cut-off point at 75. The age of those coming through continues to get older until the end of that period when new ones are. And I'll wait.
Thank you, Ms. Holborn. I thank the Honourable Lady for letting me intervene. And I actually do agree with what she's saying. I've looked into this. If you actually look at the maths, as I've spoke earlier on in the speech, the average age is about 70 around that point. The average active Lord's 65 years of age. Yes, you're correct in the fact that there is a mathematical schism here where you would be able to be appointing Lords and it would pushing up the age. However, over a period of 20 years, it really is down to how many Lords are appointed in the initial stages and a calculated assessment of, bearing in mind the ages of the Lords and of how many Lords may be around in 20 years' time. We start to work out a taper that would get us to that point. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I touched the microphone. If you have a situation where the Lords at the moment, so the youngest ones are in their 30s, then if you don't appoint any more, then in 20 years you end up with the youngest ones in their 50s, which is obviously a little bit of a concern. Possibly there could be some such system where there was a level of election amongst those who are life peers, as well as those who are hereditary peers. Obviously that's, our policy is to abolish the House of Lords in total, but if that's not going to happen, then we want to be looking forward to something that is a bit more closer to representative democracy, so is a bit more closer to elections and to representing the breadth of the population. I mean, obviously a mean age of 70 is nowhere near the mass of the population, and although I'm not in any way being ageist, I'm just suggesting that there's a lack of representativeness there. So if there was some sort of system where the current life peers were elected or chosen, a group of them was chosen to continue, then if they were chosen in a democratic way, then you would be more likely to get a swathe of representativeness. Yeah.
Thank the Honourable Lady again. Yes, I understand where you're coming from, and I share some of those sentiments also. However, we did look at this in the last Parliament, and we couldn't get it through the House. I actually do think that the House of Lords should be kept in the same manner it is now. It's just how we get the numbers down. It is probably one of the, I haven't got the panacea for it. I'm hoping this would be the start of it. But I do share the sentiments of the Honourable Lady, and perhaps this could be looked at in future years.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't have much more I'd like to say. I really appreciate the chance to come in this debate and to be involved in it, and I really hope that going forward we can find a constructive way forward that does include reform of the House of Lords and particularly reducing the numbers. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Holloway. It's a pleasure to have you carefully and accomplishedly looking after us during the course of our conversations and debates this morning. Always a pleasure to see that. And congratulations as well, if I can, to my honourable friend from Morecambe and Lunesdale for securing this important debate. This is an area of debate which I think has gone a little quiet in the last couple of years. And I think it's important that it shouldn't. I think it's important that it should be reawoken. And I think that he's made a very good start in doing that and sort of perhaps maybe lighting some blue touch paper elsewhere. But I'll come on to that in a minute if I can. I need to start, Mr. Holloway, with a small declaration of interest in that my wife has recently been appointed to the House of Lords as a live peer. We've had that conversation over the breakfast table where I told her that I'd already voted to abolish her and replace her with an elected representative at least twice, if not 3 or 4 times so far in Parliament, whereupon she informed me in return with slightly too much pleasure that she was no longer able to vote for me in general elections either. So I will not detain anybody with the politics of the Penrose breakfast table any longer, but just to make sure that everybody knows that's in my family background, if I can put it that way. So there's a small declaration there. But can I come back to the point which my honourable friend from Morecambe and Lunesdale was making, which is that there have been attempts, big and small, to reform the House of Lords. It is a hardy perennial both of debate in this place, but also of debating societies up and down the country, and of deep and great thoughts amongst constitutional experts, everybody from historians and academics through to think tanks and policy wonkery of all kinds. And the reason why it's been so important is because it's something which is clearly needs to be dealt with. It's something which any Democrat looks at and thinks looks odd. And to be fair, their lordships understand this as well. There have been a number of different items which have been introduced from the Lords or in conjunction between the House of Lords and the House of Commons in the last few years. My honourable friend mentioned the bill which was introduced by Dan Biles and Lord Steele, and which dealt with retirement of peers. There was also one done by Sir George Young and Baroness Hayman, I think, as well, on expulsion and suspension as well. So there have been successful attempts, albeit relatively small scale, at Lords reform, as well as less successful ones for grander Lords reform, like the example of the bill which failed to make progress during the course of the last Parliament. And therefore it's a little odd, Mr. Holloway, that this area seems to run out of steam in the course of the last couple of years. I thought that the Honourable Gentleman's proposals, my Honourable Friend's proposals, were very interesting indeed. I thought they were very thought-provoking. He was suggesting a proposal which would retain much of the expertise and the ability to provide advice amongst those peers who would be part of the council, those who were over 75. And he would also, under his proposals, reduce the number of voting peers as well, while still retaining that advice to be drawn on if necessary. I think that's a very interesting proposal, and I found it fascinating, Mr. Holloway, that just in the course of that small set of remarks where he was laying this out, we had a couple of additional suggestions, one from my honourable friend from the Isle of Wight, one from the honourable lady from the SNP, who speaks for Aberdeen North, both of whom sparked off that idea and contributed variations, additional thoughts. And right there, he had succeeded in beginning a revision or an expansion of this rather neglected area of debate. What I'd like to suggest to him is that I think he's done something important by lighting this blue touch paper. And I'd like him to carry on if he's willing. I think that this is something which, if we can get other parts of the constitutional, those who are interested in constitutional reform, if we get other parts of that body politic to start considering this issue in a bit more, with a bit more energy and with a bit more focus, perhaps sparked on or spurred on by his ideas here, then we may very well get a series of other proposals in this area, which could be tremendously helpful and I think will help us to broaden the debate and to enrich the debate as well. The government's election manifesto, Mr. Holloway, you will be aware, says that we want to work to continue to make sure the House of Lords continues to fulfil its valuable role in scrutinising legislation. I was pleased to hear my honourable friend start off by saying that he felt they did do that, and he thought it was an important role which should continue. We want to help them continue to do that, and into holding the government to account. But also, while it is difficult to envisage a return in the immediate future to the bigger, bolder issue of massive whole-scale Lords reform, we do want to continue to consider ideas about limiting the number of peers and further ideas around retirement. So his proposals are bang on the money. They are exactly where it might be possible as a practical measure to take these sorts of things forward. And that's why I think we should be encouraging other people to propose alternatives as well, so that we aren't just faced with one idea by one brave soul who has decided to try and light this up again, but that others should too. Should participate as well. And also, I would encourage him not just to talk to think tanks, not just to talk to constitutional experts outside Parliament. I think it's crucial that he gets the Lords involved as well. It's noticeable that the other two successful recent attempts have been done in close conjunction as effectively as private members' bills between members of the Commons and members of the Lords. And that, I think, that element of buy-in from the upper house has been absolutely essential. And who would be better placed to make proposals which might get buy-in and consent from their lordships than other members of the House of Lords as well. I'll give way to
Andrew Turner.
I wonder if I could suggest one problem, and that is it would require, throughout this period, a denial, a self-denial from the Prime Minister, and I'm not only talking about this Prime Minister, but future Prime Ministers, because the number of peers who have been created over the last 15 years has been staggeringly high. It cannot go on at that rate. And I'd like to know how we persuade Prime Ministers of all possible colours, but only one is likely to be in government, I realise, but we've got to sort out a way to prevent them using their power to create too many peers.
Well, Mr. Holloway, my honourable friend from the Isle of Wight makes my point for me, which is that I don't think my honourable friend from Morecambe and Lunesdale is pretending that this is a complete answer. He is proposing it as, I think, an interesting and thought-provoking contribution to a broader debate. And honourable friend from the Isle of Wight is quite right to point out that this question about how we reduce the size of the Lords will not only depend on people leaving or standing down or retiring or entering the councillors, as this proposal suggests, but also will depend on the number of people coming in and at what age they come in. This proposal avowedly, and I think my honourable friend from Morecambe and Lunesdale was quite straightforward about this, does not necessarily address that directly, and therefore that's why I'm suggesting that we ought to have other people contributing to this debate, because it will require other proposals to come up with a full suite of potential answers. I'll give way.
David Morris.
I thank the Minister for giving way. I know the Minister may not be able to answer this question. However, I would ask if he could possibly point me in the right direction in the House of Lords to like-minded parliamentarians or Lords who would like to take this further. I do know that in previous times, as in Dan Barr's case, he worked very closely with the Lords with much respect.
Well, Mr. Holloway, I'm sure that the whips in the Lords and the leader of the Lords will be happy to point him at people who might be interested. And I'd also suggest to him that he might want to talk to some of the Lords who have sponsored the two successful private members' bills that have gone through recently, because they will, if they might be interested themselves, or alternatively, they might have other colleagues who would be interested in picking that up. So that would be my starting point. But I hope, Mr. Holloway, that other people outside this room will have been listening to this debate and their interest will be piqued, that they will start to consider this important and, as I said, currently unexpectedly neglected area of constitutional reform, because we have only just started to focus on this. This is an incredibly valuable, therefore, starter for 10, a way of beginning a debate, a way of kicking things off. But I think we need to be clear that it is a starting point. It is not the final answer. I don't think, to be fair to my honourable friend from Morecambe and Lunesdale, he's positioning it as anything else but that. So, with any luck, Mr. Holloway, those outside this place will listen to what we've said and will start work. And if they do start work and are then delivered of weighty thoughts on a whole variety of approaches about how we can pursue this important area of constitutional reform. I will be delighted to hear what they have to say.
The question is that this House has considered reforming the House of Lords and the number of peers. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The sitting is suspended until 2:30 this afternoon. Order, order.
Grand Committee Room ident. 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 Grand Committee Room ident.